But a guy that has been both mocked to go to the 49ers with their second round pick, but then also with their first round pick, depending on who you ask. So huge disparity there is Roger Rosengarten. So great
Yeah,
name.
Roger
Love
Rosengarten
that.
from Washington. Yeah.
Yes. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about him, and then also,
Okay.
because you also not only talk about him, but his ties to the 49ers organization and why maybe that makes him, in my opinion, makes him a little bit of a stronger candidate for the 49ers to go after him, since we
Right.
know they do have an affinity for their guys.
Yeah, Rosengarten is working with Joe Staley, which always helps. And he had 2 years in high school in Colorado where his coach was Ed Mccaffrey, Christian's dad, running that system. So Rosengarten knows, is familiar with the system. And at UW, they played an advanced pro-style system as well. And Rosengarten did very well. He didn't give up any sacks. Penix didn't get sacked by anybody that Rosengarten faced. So he can do that well. The concern with Rosengarten is he didn't do well in the combine or at his pro day on reps. He only had 20 bench reps. Usually you want to see somebody in the high 20s, low 30s, and he's not there yet. So he would need to put in some work to get to that point. But technically, he's got great feet. He moves really well. He kick slides well. He gets to the second level fast. He's somebody that can work within the system, and he's sound technically, especially with his hand placement. But he
49ers
still
love that.
needs, yeah, the Niners love all of that, but he's going to need to add a lot of power. And usually when you lack NFL strength, you sit. And that's part of why the Niners, sat Spencer, is that he didn't have the NFL core strength and power yet, so he would just get manhandled at the line. And that would be the concern with Rosengarten is, can he have enough strength to play in the NFL soon? I would think no. He's going to have to develop his strength before he can take the field.
And
And so
that's
he could be a project. Now, I don't think that
I don't love
Rosengarten
a
goes to
project like
31.
that because I don't like a project like that because, in my opinion, at least if you're getting Guyton or Mims, or even higher than that, even if they do end up sitting and becoming a project, their potential seems really high. This guy, you're
Yeah.
talking about him like a project, but then also maybe he doesn't have as high of an upside, so it's like, well, why?
Well, no,
You know.
I think he has a high upside. It's just that
Although I will
he's not
say,
as physically
Marco,
dominated. Yeah, CG, and shout out to CG. He really knows his stuff. Good guy.
yeah,
He says that Rosengarten's young. He is. He's 22. He's still got a lot of work that he can put in and develop. And he's not a project, less for project than Mims and Guyton. That's true. He's got pro technique in terms of, again, of his hand placement and his knowledge in pass pro and what he can do in angles and moving his feet well and kick sliding, etc. I think that he's more advanced in his technique than especially Guyton.
okay.
But the 20 bench reps is really a concern. Typically for the Niners, if you don't have that core NFL strength yet, you don't take the field. So that would be a concern, is that when does he get that power up to where it needs to be? But once he does, then he can be a key part of the team going forward, is that he's got the other pieces of the puzzle. And it's
And
great
what
that you've got someone that has great feet, great hands, strong technique, smart, knows the system. So there's a lot of positives for Rosengarten. But I don't think that you need to take him at 31. He's somebody that's
that would be a reach.
mid second, mid maybe late. So he's somebody that I've seen as early as 42 and as late as 55 on Rosengarten. I think that would be
So
his
he'd be
window.
like a trade up in the second round,
Yeah,
potentially.
yeah,
Which is interesting. I feel like, at least for me, when I think of trading up, I'm always thinking about the first round. But there is, like, probably we should, as fans, should anticipate a lot of movement back and up with the 49ers having so many picks, even in the other rounds as well. So maybe this is
sure.
something possible.
Yeah. Well, I think that the Niners are going to target who they want, because this draft is so big and where you've got these large pools of guys with similar grades. They're going to need to target and say, okay, I'm going to move up for this guy and move down for that guy. It's going to be one of those kind of drafts. But it's not going to be about hoarding picks. It's just going to be about trading a group of picks to get to where you want to get the guy that you're targeting.
Yeah,
And
because they have
if
like
that's
10
somebody
picks
like
and they're not going to.
Rosengarten, that's somebody that they can look at. And CG says he's actually 21. Okay, my bad. I thought it was 20. I had in my notes he's 22. But regardless, he's young, and
Yeah.
he can develop that power and that strength. And
And
that's the only real barrier that he faces, is that he's got everything else. He just needs to get the strength in.
I wonder, this is just a, like, you wouldn't, you're not in his head, but I wonder why, because Marco does say that people thought he was going to go back to college for another year. I do wonder why he didn't do that with the NIL money. It seems like he could have gotten paid, and I wonder if he does add strength, he potentially would go even higher in the draft, don't you think?
Potentially.
It sounds like
But
all the
teams,
positives you mentioned
yeah,
of him seem great. It's just like, oh, he is lacking some strength, but when you think about his age, it's like you can probably add that.
yeah, he can. And
Now, I will
the
say
key
Spencer
is he
Burford
adds
was on
that,
the
and he's
team.
still pretty young once he's added that. That's another
Yeah.
benefit.
I will say, though, Spencer Burford has been on the team for a while, and I remember him last offseason kind of bragging that he had added some weight to his
He
bench
looked
press.
good, but he still couldn't get it done.
But the numbers he gave were not, he was like very impressed with himself, and I was like, I was like shocked. Just
Yeah,
like I like
yeah.
go to just a normal gym, and I know a lot of people who bench way more than that, and I was like, I don't know, maybe this is biased on my part. When I think of NFL player, I think of like way stronger than the average human, and
Right.
so I was like, wait, what? That seems wrong. Now, obviously, talent on a field versus just like picking up and putting something down is different, but I'm just
Yeah.
saying there could be a little in my head question of, okay, well, under the 49ers, do guys add a lot of strength? Like, was that a Spencer Burford specific problem, or is it something to do with the training staff problem? Now
Impossible to
some
know,
things
really.
that, yeah, and something that might give the 49ers a little confidence, or not confident, like just some insight on what type of player he is and maybe what he's capable of when it comes to growth over time and
Yeah.
mindset, could be he has some ties to some guys in the organization. So Joe Staley, you talked about, he's
Yeah.
been training with Joe Staley, right? So that's pretty impressive. Obviously the 49ers, would probably be more than willing to call up Joe Staley and ask how that's going. And then
Yeah.
also Ed McCaffrey was his coach. Am I right on that?
Yeah.
So
2 years in
we
high
know
school
the
in
49ers
Colorado.
love the McCaffreys. So
Sure.
that,
Sure. And they can hit up both of those guys and say that, okay, who is he as a teammate? Who is he in terms of his competitiveness? Who is he in terms of his mean streak? And so I think that those are a lot of things where they can say, okay, we can vouch for who this guy is. And that's important, is that you get to know not just the player, but the character. And I think that that's something where Staley can really go to bat for him. And the 49ers can say, okay, we can go forward with confidence, knowing what kind of player and person Roger Rosengarten is. That can help him.
Now I'm interested, just to bring up his comment, just my dad, because he's watching. 49ers need to look at players in the second or third rounds. There have been plenty of sleepers in those rounds also.
Sure.
Now, I do agree. Now, but I will say, and this is an original thought, I'm stealing this from, I think, Rob Stats Guerrera, but I heard it earlier, where potentially in those middle rounds, there might be like less talent than normal the last couple years and even moving forward, now that the college NIL deals do exist, because maybe more of those mid-round players actually might want to stay in college for longer because they're no longer trying to get to the NFL so they can get paid. Is there a truth to that? I've just heard
I
that,
think
and when I
there
heard it, I
can
thought that was
be, but
interesting.
I think that's a case by case thing. It's not something where you can just say that across the board it means X. I don't think there's anything that's really going to apply that way. It's more of just, for this player, does it
No,
make more
Tom, I
sense
want
for
you to
him
make
to stay?
statements.
Sorry.
All
Yes.
right.
Okay. Definitively.
Hard and fast. Definitive.
This. Now, I would think that for some players that's true. That if you're on a team in a big market and you've got a little bit of spotlight and some juice to you and some buzz, that it might be better for you to stay, and you can define where you go and when. But basically, it's the sooner you get into the NFL, the sooner you can get to your second contract. So I think that the economics are still more about,
Yeah,
you
you're
can
right,
get
because
the
you don't
big
want to.
bag in your second deal. That's
Yeah,
what you
because you
need
want
to
to
be
like work.
targeting.
Players like to work it out so they can get that, if they can get a third deal before 30, right? I know
Right,
I've
right.
like heard people talk about, like, I think that Debo strategically did a 3-year, or wanted a 3-year contract so that he could get it at 29, because like once they have that 30 drop off, teams are like, I don't want to play you.
Yep.
Which
Yep.
ended up being a positive for the 49ers too, that he's
Yeah.
on a shorter